22nd. It's being live streamed, but I can't see it yet. So I'm gonna wait a minute.
As we're now streaming on live on YouTube.
Does it say that?
Yeah, I'm getting that.
Okay. I just have to pause it as soon as it pops up on my screen, or else I'll hear the lag. And that'll be really distracting for both of us.
For everybody.
Yes. Okay, great. So that's done. And now I got to find you back on the Zoom. Where are you, Maia? Where are you?
I'm here. Annalisa.
Hello. Hello. The joys of live. Hi, everybody. This is Annalisa. And today I'm here live with my very good friend, Maia Wilde. And I'm going to read you her bio here. Maia is here we go. Maia Wilde hosts the acclaimed podcast, Dirt Road Less Traveled, and is a speaker, writer, and self-realization and self-actualization expert. She's known as a soul medium and the deep coach, whose mission is to connect people to their true self, discover their life's work, and stop living according to random rules. Hey.
Yeah.
Maia's professional background includes experience as a crisis intervention counselor. Oh, okay. Maia's professional background includes experience as a crisis intervention counselor, yoga teacher, actress, and health coach. So she's able to offer her clients a full spectrum approach to solidifying their foundation and moving forward from a new perspective. She takes her clients off-road to find new answers that create inspired solutions and to help them break through into thriving in all areas, regardless of past hurdles.
All areas, regardless of past hurdles. Let's get this.
Awesome bio.
That's right.
So I just realized the, what are they called? They're out there mowing the lawn. The people that mow the lawn are here. So we might have some fun noises.
That's the way it always goes. I'm having a blizzard. We're clearly across the country from each other.
So I'm just gonna
lawn mowing. What?
Let everybody know, hey, we're live. So that's done. Okay, great. Great. So Maia, I asked Maia here today. I had this extraordinary experience on Sunday. I called Maia and left her a message crying. That has to do with this cat, this cat and feeling your feelings. And somehow I'm going to wrap it all back into the goddess throughout our conversation. And so I wanted to share this story because of the powerful transformation that occurred for me. And I think that other people can have this kind of transformation in their own lives. And I wanted Maia and I to be able to talk about that today. So I'm going to start with the story. So on Sunday, I came home, and as I was about to drive up my driveway, I could see that there was a cat on the side of the road that was in peril. So I ran over and I picked it up, and like literally in the nick of time, there was a few cars barreling at me at 50 miles per hour. And I was like, stop. And this woman swerved around me right in the nick of time. I was like ready to get hit to save this cat. And I run to my car, and this cat is not in good shape. And I'm shaking and I'm scared. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I call my mother, whose boyfriend is a vet. His clinic's about 15 minutes away. He agrees to meet me, even though he's closed on the weekends and he's not technically an emergency vet. So I go there, and this baby, she's not a baby, she was an adult cat, but she was bleeding in my arms, right? She was bleeding in my arms. And I was just like, come on, baby, you can make it. You can make it. I gotta save you. You can make it. And so we get to the clinic, and I pass her over to the vet. And he's like, well, she doesn't look good, but I'm going to give her some x-rays. And, in my mind, I was like, oh my God, if this cat survives, I'm going to adopt this cat. This cat, I'm going to take care of it. And I promise I won't ever let anything happen to it again. And this is a cat who was clearly a feral cat who lived in the neighborhood at the barn, the dairy cow farm across the street. And so as I was waiting for the results, I was talking to the woman who lives in this house where I'm currently dog sitting. And she said that, this cat, she's had a really great life. I don't know how she's managed to survive with all of these, predatory birds. There's bald eagles around here, golden eagles, owls, coyotes, every kind of predator imaginable in the air and on the ground. And she's had a great life. She's had several litters. So I want you to know, if she doesn't survive, that she's had a great life. And so I did get the call from the vet, and he said, her back was broken, and the most humane thing was to put her down. And of course, I was just, of course, yes, of course. And the feeling inside of me was so distraught. I was so distraught and pained that I couldn't save this animal. And I've had this series of animals that I've seen die this year, multiple birds, and or who I've seen right after they've died. And I was just like, why am I seeing all this animal death and suffering? Why? And I was screaming, screaming is not right, but crying and howling, like those deep guttural sobs. And finally, 3 hours later in the shower, and I'm like, God, goddesses, like spirit, ancestors, tell me why this is happening. This is so painful. Why do I have to see this animal suffering? Because she basically was dying in my arms. And finally, I heard this message that it's because you needed to get in touch with your own suffering. You experienced this so you could feel your own suffering. Essentially, the suffering that I have been burying deep inside me, the feelings I haven't allowed myself to feel. Because at one point in this howling, I was like, I really wanted to save her. Why? I thought maybe I could at least save her. I couldn't save the other animals. And then I was like, hold on a minute. That's an old primal thought. Who else have I been trying to save who I couldn't save? And I'm thinking of my brother and different people in my life, right? And as soon as all of this stuff started to coalesce and I howled again really deeply, I started to feel some movement in my chest and some energy release. And I mean, literally, it was like that completely freed me. It was feeling the suffering that allowed that energy, that suffering energy that had been lodged in my body, to leave. And one more piece is that I've been suffering from headaches, chronic headaches, the past 8 months or so. Prior to that, migraines, but I've got those under control. But I've had these crazy headaches, and I can't seem to manage the issue. Nothing seems to be the source of the problem. But let me tell you, since I did that deep grieving, I have not had a headache since then. And they went away the moment I allowed myself to release that chest pain. And so here we are. I called Maia right away. I mean, it was like the experience was so fresh. I was like just turned off the shower, and I called you and left you a message.
Naked,
like,
dripping, leaving a message.
I was like, the water's still dripping, but I have to tell you about this. And we need to go on a YouTube live and talk about it. This is incredible, right? How important it is to allow yourself to feel the depths of your feelings. Because if you don't, I think that it's a repository. You're just asking for, different kinds of psychosomatic illnesses. And, I don't want to discount the fact that people are genetic, and there's a lot of stuff that causes illness, but, the power of our emotions to instigate illness as a way to say, hey, listen to me, is really profound. And I want you to talk, but I want to say one more thing before we get into the discussion. For me, this goes back to the meaning of what it means to be aligned in a goddess consciousness or a matriarchal consciousness, where feminine values of listening to your body, being fully present to your emotions are primary. Also, feeling the suffering of the other, like getting into that I and thou relationship with all life around us. That suffering is inevitable. I mean, physical suffering happens. Okay. But I think that as long as we can be present with one another, we can be present to whatever one another's feeling, and heal that together. So there's the piece of interdependence with all life around us, and
You said
interdependence. Yeah, interdependence.
Yeah.
Being relational, being in that I and thou relationship where I'm not above you or below you. It's just like we are in this like great cosmic dance together, and we can witness one another. Which is what I hope I did for that cat. I just wanted her to feel love. I wanted her to feel love before she died. And hopefully I could do that for her. And then again, yes, that feeling, like, right now, allowing myself to feel the feelings. And this beautiful, one of the things I really, really wanted in my pain was to be witnessed. I really wanted somebody to witness me. And so it's really actually special that even though I'm not in the throngs of this deep suffering, but that I get to have you be here with me in this conversation and witness my story live, and witness my emotional journey. And that's really special too. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, as you were saying that, I'm like, we're witnessing each other. Whoever's watching this now or in the future is witnessing, but also hopefully having some kind of a moment that occurs to them, a memory or an experience of theirs that they can then witness. We are witnessing ourselves. I mean, there's so many layers to that. So I think that is, I know what I like to do. Like when I give my talks, I'm always saying to people, I'm going to ask a lot of questions, but you don't have to share your answers publicly, but I want to invite you into a conversation with yourself. Because in fact, I mean, it's super powerful to be vulnerable. Like I shared with you a week or two ago, that it was one thing for me to share with you and another good friend all of the stuff that's up in my life right now, but it was a whole other ballgame when I got vulnerable with my mother, who has consistently been a little bit of a challenge for me to be vulnerable with. Hi, Mom, in case you're Googling me and watching this. But what's interesting about it is she and I, from that moment when I did that, I felt unburdened sharing with her. I also created a bit of a container around, I don't want you, like what I need. Like she said, what do you need from me? And I said, an ally. So I was able to help her step into the role. And now we're having a series of conversations that are completely different from anything we've had before. And I get the feeling she's witnessing herself differently. And then I get to witness her marriage to my father that she's now sharing with me decades later. So I just, as you were talking and saying interdependence, and I heard inner dependence when you said that, that's why I clarified. So I'm like, oh, wait, there's all these ways to do it, because sometimes we're waiting for the right person to witness us in the right way. But I have found if I just write it down, I write a little poem or something, and then I'm like, oh, there it is. The thing, the feeling that I had, there's me. Oh, I'm witnessed. It can really heal me in that moment. And then also with another person. So I just want to say all of that. Like there's not one way to witness. And I think right before we started this recording, you know, how I'd spilled a glass of water all over my desk, like not just a glass, like a mason jar full of that much water.
Yeah.
Right. And you were like, it's cool. We're just going with the flow. And we're going to be talking about like things getting lodged in our body and listening to ourselves. And I think, and we've seen this as things, as we've been more online and people have been doing Zooms from their homes, and we're seeing people's families, and all of that sort of more reality is creeping into our professional world, which is, and you can, Anna, of course, correct me, because I know that you've studied all of this. And I know when we speak, sometimes my vocabulary is not like up to 2022 standards. I have been feeling old recently where I'm like, oh, that language is outdated. But the way that I would say it is that the way that, say, business has been done is masculine. And the way that, like, I don't know, is it first wave feminism, you know, stepped out and like took over. And I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. So I was seeing like business women for the first time, and they were like really in their masculine powering through, right? But now we're experiencing this opportunity where it's not like you're putting on your shell and then in a cold way telling the story. You're allowing the emotions to flow.
Right.
We're talking about witnessing. And in fact, I want to do this. I worked out this morning and I'm like, I have this opportunity to either like breathe from here up and like maybe keel over in the middle of this conversation. Oh my God. Or just release my body a little bit and be in reality around, holy cow, my upper back is a little jammed and I'm holding my breath. And for years, that's how I lived. And I know that's how most of us live because we have started. I mean, I just want to say, so there's all this conversation these days about gender. You and I talk a lot about masculinity, femininity, and they have done these studies where they'll put a newborn baby in like a pink onesie and in a blue onesie, same baby. Nobody knows actually if it's a boy or a girl, what gender it is. And when people in these psychological studies pick up the baby in the pink onesie, they're very soft, like, aren't you such a pretty little thing? Yeah. Oh, look at you, pretty little thing. Yeah. And then the baby's in a blue onesie and they're like, oh, who's a big boy? You're so big, throwing him up in the air. And so when we talk about gender and how it feels to be us and how it feels to be embodied, is it nature versus nurture? What's native to us? What's, socialized into us? It's almost impossible to tell.
Right.
And I mean, my own journey of embodiment, or I'm going to even say incarnation, because I'm like, just being in my body has felt like a struggle my whole life. And so how do we get back to what we are really feeling? How do we even tune into that? Right. So I think the story you just shared and like how you let yourself howl like that is amazing. And that's what we all need to be doing because I think when you get to that level of like sobbing, howling in the shower, calling out to the other side, right? Like,
yeah.
That's where you start to heal. I actually had a client at one point. She was a massage therapist. She was in her 50s. She was doing a lot of movement and dance. She had an altar, like all of that beautiful stuff. And nothing was moving for her. And in a conversation, I'm like, but are you really crying? Are you really dancing, like thrashing around? Like maybe get on the bed and writhe around. And she goes, oh, I need to cry past the point where I'm like, all right, I cried a little.
Right.
She's like, I need to keep going.
Yeah.
I just gave myself chills because I'm like, that's it. And that's what you were doing there, like howling. And I know for me, when I went through it, I was always like falling down on the floor in the kitchen when I was going through my big thing. Like I still remember the fake tile floor of that one apartment because there I'd be. Why? And then I'd be making these sounds and talking about witnessing, like I'm in the throes of this thing, like gasping, choking, sputtering, you know what I mean? Like on the floor in my apartment, calling out like, why? And a part of me is like, what sound was that?
yes, exactly.
I've never even heard an animal make that sound. So that's where like we need to be able to trust ourselves and like the healing mechanism and the knowledge mechanism of our bodies, which is so feminine.
Yeah.
Although I've been reading recently about like, where did I see this? Oh, it was on a podcast. Some guys were discussing like, are men trained not to experience pleasure? And I see this with my boyfriend who's got like a military background, but he was shut down before the military, what seemed like a great fit for him. He just can't even feel in his body. And so.
Well, yeah. I mean, just like historically speaking, because in the Western tradition, the philosophical tradition, like, and especially when we get into Christianity throughout most of the Christian tradition, like men are associated with spirit and transcendence, and women are associated with body, matter, irrationality, feelings, emotion, and all of that was devalued and shunned as seen as inferior, right? So you have this dynamic where, the intellect, rationality is up here and everything else associated with the feminine and women is down here. And so neither can really access the other. And one, especially because one is already, leveled below the other. So men are still in this place, I think, where we're in a place where they get to try to reclaim those, qualities for themselves. And as a culture, reclaiming these qualities for everybody as valuable for everybody. And sometimes I'm on the fence, like they're not, when we label things feminine and masculine, are they really, or is that just our way of kind of organizing and conceptualizing things, which is, I'm kind of a both and mindset about it. So I want to say that obviously, like, in my opinion, yes, I think men are socialized to, not feel their feelings except for anger. Anger is like the only acceptable feeling they're allowed to feel, and not feel their bodies, not feel pleasure. Go back to what you're saying. And because the idea of male pleasure is very narrow, very linear, and very narrow. So I think that's also pretty interesting thing to bring into this conversation as well.
Yeah. And, it's interesting too, I'm just going to say all these things have popped up as you were talking. So I'm just going to say them in some random order, but I keep having this memory, I was talking about being embodied, or for me, my own struggle with feeling incarnated, like literally feeling like I couldn't feel what was in my body. And, in my 20s, I started to do a lot of Buddhist meditation. There was a Zen monastery near me in upstate New York. And a friend of mine gave me a zafu. So I was like sitting on my own meditation cushion, and I started to do yoga. And I noticed in these forward bending poses, I said this to my yoga teacher, I just went to this one yoga class, not contemporary yoga at all. We're looking back 30 years practically. And yoga was really kind of gentle. It wasn't athletic. It was like, there you are doing a hatha yoga pose. Oh, then you'll do another. You know what I mean? You wore whatever, I don't even remember what I wore. There wasn't clothing for this stuff, right? So I just want to put that in context, because I remember the first yoga class I took in Brooklyn in my 30s. I was like, these people were all like, I was like in a photo shoot. You know what I mean? I was like, I think these people go to the gym to look hot in yoga class. Like, that was my first impression. So I just want to bring people back a little bit to this very sort of homely. These people actually sold these like Scandinavian stoves, and we did yoga in their showroom. So it was warm with all of these fireplaces going at dusk outside of a cemetery. It was pretty evocative. And I remember doing these forward bends at the end of class, and I would just start like, anger would rise up in me, and I would start basically cursing my yoga teacher, who was a perfectly nice woman. And at one point after class, I said to her, I have this question for you. And I told her what was happening. Like, what's the solution? Whenever I do forward bends, I get filled with anger, and I'm like cursing you in my mind that you're holding us in this posture. And she said, do more forward bends. And I was like, what? And then she put it in a context, which again, in terms of trusting ourselves and that healing and knowledge mechanism of the body, I know for myself, I used to cry every 18 months and like fall apart. And I was like, let's shut down, tamp it down, because it was kind of out of control. And my whole childhood was like, Maia, you're so sensitive. You're so dramatic. You're so difficult, like that. And I had started to realize around 21 that I had had a lot of sexual abuse in my early childhood. And so, of course, I was tamping that down as well. And what this yoga teacher said is that forward bends are releasing poses. She said, do them every night before bed, but maybe put a big cushion on your knees. Don't do them in your bedroom, so you're not like shedding that and associating that experience, releasing an anger experience, with your bedroom. So I started to do that. And I just remember this moment where I was doing a standing forward bend, and I was sweating because it was the end of my yoga practice. And I just started sobbing hysterically. And I remember I called a friend who didn't really know what to do with me. And I was kind of like, I don't really know what to do. It's like, I'm going to use, this is the analogy that came to my mind. It's like, if you were about to have an orgasm and you're like, I'm about to have an orgasm, let me call somebody and tell them about it. And then you don't now what?
Yes.
But I think that we tend to do that because of what you were talking about first, that witnessing is so powerful. But I really believe that we need to trust our capacity and our strength to witness ourselves.
Yes.
And that you can do it alone in your room. And in fact, one of the places where I was sitting in meditation weekly with some Lama, I remember complaining to him, I was just like really in my victimhood and lonely and in my 20s and single, and I didn't know what was going on. I was experiencing all of this pain, emotional pain. And I said to him, I don't have anybody to cry to. And he was like, oh, you don't want anyone there when you're crying. You want to be free and alone to get ugly and snotty and not have to worry about somebody else. And the part of me that heard him, that wasn't like a 24-year-old, lonely, scared, single human, was like, oh, it also made me feel like, oh, I'm not a loser because I don't have like a lover or a best friend or somebody to witness me there. He gave me a tool, like, you don't want that. It gets in the way. And so I really learned how to start witnessing myself. I remember another time I answered the phone when I was crying, and I'm like, I hate when people, now that we have cell phones, that was my landline with my answering machine hooked up to it back in the mid 90s. But have you had that where you call someone and you're like, why'd they answer the phone? They can't talk to me now. And I feel like we have these porous boundaries. And for those of us who are consciously on our path and our healing journey and are like, wait a second, what's going on? We're like waking up. I think that I guess what I'm sharing is like these milestones along the way for me. It's kind of like labor, when a woman is pregnant, she's going to be having a baby. They're like, here's what's going to happen. It's not the same for everyone, but your water is going to break. Like there's a sort of rhythm and a sort of path to what the body normally does.
Right. I think I want to go back to that moment, in that yoga class in which you were experiencing anger every time you did these front forward bends, right? And then she gave you the instruction to keep practicing them every day. Do it more. I wonder if that anger arose for you because of your own resistance to feeling the layers of emotion underneath the anger.
It's very interesting. I mean, I know for a lot of women, feeling their own anger is something they're definitely not connected to. I've talked to women where like there was severe sexual abuse and violent, like domestic violence against them and their mother that they witnessed growing up. And I'm like, well, it sounds like you probably have a lot of anger or rage, and I can share some tools with you to help expel that and release that. And they're like, no, I wouldn't say that I'm angry. And I'm like, whoa, because you are like, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'll probably think about it after we're done with this conversation here, but I have always had a lot of anger. I would even say I was a rageaholic. I also had hypoglycemia. They have done these studies because I was a domestic violence counselor, a rape crisis counselor. And so always interested in like, what are those dynamics? Like, how do people get in a coupleship like that? And I actually was in, my ex, where I was like, I could call the police now, like domestic violence light, where I'm like, well, he never hit me. Like, as soon as you're talking like that, it's like, oh, this is not good. So I've been there myself, and it just kind of like, what? How do you get into that? Because there's a dance, like, right, that happens. It's a dynamic that's created. And they've done these studies where men who were violent to their families, when their diet stabilized and their hypoglycemia, their blood sugar stabilized, their violence went down. And so talk
about listening to your body, right? Your body will always tell you what it needs.
So a lot of times people are like, well, I'm just that way. And I'm like, what did you have for breakfast? I mean, but seriously, because we've been talking about this for years. I feel like I finally nailed my diet. I know what I need to eat, when I need to eat it, when I need to go to bed, what kind of exercise, when. I never miss a meditation. Do you know, like and it's I've always said, like, I'm a very sensitive ecosystem.
Me too. I say that
is Maia,
I have to say too, that I've really started to not just kind of assume what my body needs by listening to the outside experts, although I listen to them too, but I've started really just asking my body and listening, waiting until I hear the answer. And it's extraordinary. Like, over the summer, I was like, I forget what the issue was in the moment, but I was like, what should I have? And I heard licorice root. And then of course I look up licorice root, and it what it helps with was exactly what I needed help with.
That stuff is cool. It's so cool.
Yeah, no, it is cool. And it's like your body will tell you, or your higher intelligence, however you want to conceptualize that, it doesn't matter. But the answers are always, I think, within you if you find ways of listening. So,
and I think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that there's this beautiful coupledom. Like when I work with people on like, how do you listen to your intuition? It's not like you're just trying to like connect to the ether necessarily, although that's one technique, but you can use that, say, in your finances by doing a bunch of research about different ways to deal with your money. And then like one client, she had like this thing was coming up around her father because he was recommending one thing, but she's like, why would I trust my father with my money? He's a mess. And so she did all of her due diligence, her research, and then we connected and then we muscle tested it. So it's like, I think that full spectrum approach of you may not know what you need, you're feeling off, but you start like feeling tired all the time. And then maybe somebody mentions, I don't know if this is what the licorice root was for, but like, oh, and then your intuition will be like that. So you don't necessarily have to know it inside yourself. That's what I think we can use the outside experts for.
Yes.
So it's like, these are the options. And then you're like, that's the one that feels right to me.
Right. There's many paths to finding a balance inside your body. I want to go back to something you said earlier about that you had said that you have exercises or techniques for women or for men too, to feel their anger, to get in touch with their anger. Would you feel comfortable sharing any of those? I'll
share anything. Okay. I don't know. I think that my techniques are best. The anger, I was thinking specifically of release techniques. Let me say this, to get in touch with yourself, what I like to call like to get in touch with your wild free self, like really connect back to your true self, who you were before the world got to you. Like the closest we can get to that soul essence without all of the socialization and the sexual abuse and the ancestral load of inheritance. Like who is that? Whatever your issue is, what am I going to do with my career? Do I stay in this relationship? Where do I live? What does my body need to eat right now? It does not matter what the thing is. Quiet alone time, whether that's meditation, walking, going to the coffee shop with your journal, just like quiet alone time. If you want to hear yourself, yes. Quiet alone time. And it can be very uncomfortable. Like I hated sitting quietly with myself because I had so much unprocessed, unlistened to, unheard parts of myself, or what they're talking about these days, like unprocessed trauma. And it doesn't have to be dramatic, like sexual abuse or domestic violence. Any time that you were taught to look away from yourself, which again, like, I'm not saying I'm against strollers and high chairs, but it's going to sound like that with what I'm about to say. You've been there. If you have kids, you know, or if you've been in a restaurant or you've been in nanny, you know, people are like, sit still. Now it's like, here's your tablet. Right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
Right. And kids are like, and I worked in restaurants a long time. I was a nanny. I taught first grade. I've been around a ton of kids. I don't have my own children, but I know you pick that kid up and you walk around the restaurant or you walk around the house or you take them outside, they calm down immediately. They know what they need. I'm saying this to everybody. You all knew what you needed. And everyone was like, sit still they're like, kids are writhing around like, let me out of the stroller. And they're like, have a snack. I mean, yeah. So we knew. And why don't we know? It's not like something's wrong with us. This is why I hate the term neurodivergent. I understand that it describes something, but it sounds like, oh yes, there is something wrong with you because there's a norm and you're divergent and it's permanent. No, right. Our culture creates neurodivergence because so I want to say this, trauma is any time that you were told you could not trust yourself. From the time you were a teeny little baby in moments that look totally innocuous and innocent and like somebody's being a good parent. Totally. I want to bring it back to that. And I have no idea what you were originally asking. Oh, practices. Okay. So being quiet and alone with yourself. I had this client. This is interesting. This was a client I worked with. She's an artist. She and I worked together like 6 years ago. And she just sent me an email 2 days ago saying, her husband needs some help with his career. Would I talk to him if I work with men? That is, talk about like the best vote of confidence you could ever get. And I've had that a lot. Clients have recommended their siblings. One client sent me her mother. It doesn't always work out. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it's a really great, like, I'm like, wow, okay, thank you. But her big thing back then was, she was like, I think the homework we're giving me is too big. I think if I could just pee when my body tells me I need to pee. And you'd think, oh, she's an artist. She's all in the flow. No, she was like a type A artist. Yes. Painting. I need to get through this work. I have a commission. I have a deadline. So we have been training.
That's how I work, by the way. That's my modus operandi. Yeah. Get through it.
Get through it. No. So either we're like on one end of the spectrum, which is where I always was, like getting nothing done. Like, I'm just going to feel, or I'm going to wait for a sign from the universe, or it's like, I'm just getting through and I'm getting it done, more type A. But then you're like, but am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I completely screwing up my body because I'm not listening, So we need to find a way to integrate all of that. So, okay, getting back to the practices, quiet alone time. So you can start to listen and start to sense like, oh, do I need movement or do I need a nap? Like that. And then in terms of repressed emotions, I love to teach, I would say this, for emotional healing, you need, wait, let me see if I can remember even, yes. Sometimes you need containment, which is where you sit quietly and you just allow the crazy emotions to roil around inside of you. Because we often need to get stronger in our container to be able to experience our own discomfort, other people's discomfort, pain, suffering, like you were saying. So containment is one method of emotional healing. The other is emotional release, what you were describing, howling in the shower, right? And then the third is expression, where it's like making art, writing poems, dancing, talking, whatever that is. It doesn't have to look like art, right? But I would say with emotional release, screaming. I'm a big fan of scream therapy. I really think I spent about 3.5 years after my dad died and I got broken up with and I got diagnosed with, they said I needed a hysterectomy. Still haven't had one, but that was like many years ago. But I had all of this stuff converge all at once. And I spent about 3.5 hours. Yes, there were days, but 3.5 years, literally like on the floor sobbing and screaming into pillows and like punching and kicking my bed. And all of a sudden, it's like, I can have a moment these days, but there's not that backlog of my whole lifetime or my ancestry or my past lives of pain. And so I really believe in releasing. You can really just grab a pillow, or I like to grab a towel. This is an actual technique. You can take a hand towel. I don't have one with me. I should have brought one. Fold it over and you gently cup your mouth and your throat so you protect your vocal cords. And then I like to do something in threes. So you create, again, a container. So you're not like, I'm just going to scream and I'll never stop screaming. You know what I mean?
No, but okay. So in my mind, just to interrupt you really quickly, going back to these kind of conceptualized male, female, or feminine, masculine qualities, I really envision the masculine as the container, as the structure, and the feminine is the flow and the creativity and the movement of energy. And this is somewhere that I've always had issues. I'm usually really good with the flow part. I have a really hard time with the structure, but even more so, it's the integration. Right, of the two. So I guess for like people like me who, when they go to the structure place, they're like totally in structure and they can't access the flow, or when they're in flow, it gets so lost in the flow and they can't seem to create their container. How would you deal with someone like me, or what advice would you give me?
Well, I don't know that I would deal with you personally. I'm just kidding. I love you madly. No, here's the thing. It's practice. It's practice. So you're like, oh, I'm feeling all kinds of anger or hurt, or I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm going to sit with it and just like try containment. Well, that's not working. I've been here for half an hour and nothing's changed, nothing's moving, because this is, I actually developed this guided meditation that I call the tool of awareness, based on Eckhart Tolle's work, which is where I got this, where he just talks about sit with it, feel the pain body until it starts to transmute into something different. Now, the first time I tried that, I could do it for like 10 seconds of practically screaming agony. So you dip your toes in, and every day you try to hold your feet to the fire for a few seconds longer. I got to 2 minutes, and that's when things changed for me, right? Before I had to like shove food in my face. Because I'm serious, I was bulimic. I was like, I need crunchy food now to stop feeling the pain, which women tend to need crunchy food because our anger and our anxiety, it gets physicalized and we're like trying to be nice all the time. Men at least are allowed to have angry outbursts, right? But so just know if you have cravings like that, it might be serving a purpose. So you don't have to like hate yourself on top of it. But so containment, you start with that. If that's not working, if nothing's shifting or moving, then you try some release. You grab the towel. What you're going to do, here's what you're going to do. You're going to gently press the towel so you can still breathe, but you're not scaring the neighbors, over your mouth, and cup your neck with the towel to protect your vocal cords. It's not going to be 100%. Don't worry about it. Or you can just grab a pillow and you just inhale and then you scream. And you do that 3 times and see what happens. You might start laughing. You might start crying. You might be like, that was really weird, and get up and leave the room, but you've done it.
Yeah.
And I will often say to my clients, I want to talk to you on the other side of that. One client was like, I may or may not have silently screamed into a pillow today. Like that was her big win, you know?
Yes.
So I would say you practice containment and then release. And then maybe you go make some art, or you dance, or you talk to your therapist, or do you do expression? So you keep kind of bouncing between, and slowly over time you integrate. And I'm turning 50 this year. And I know that part of what the big integration you were talking about between masculine and feminine, or anima and animus, or all, you know, like this life and the next, or child and adult, or, you know, individuation, all of that, it starts to happen at the age that I am now. And so you need to be with yourself where you are and meet yourself where you are, and know that life is actually, I'm like, this is still going on. Like some days I wake up like, this is still happening. I can't believe it. But other times it's like, wow, this is generous. Like I have another opportunity today. And like, wow, I have really found that as the years have gone on, and I've consistently applied myself to this work in a very like messy hit or miss way, it accrues.
Yes.
And I'm different now.
Yes.
So that's what I would suggest.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. I might try to scream into a pillow later today. Not that I feel like I particularly need it today, but you know, I think that's the thing. Even when you're not in the grips of a particular emotion, that stuff is still, we have stuff buried deep inside of us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right. It's like, I'm going to quote Susan Weed, the herbalist, the wise woman.
I've met her a few times.
Okay.
Yeah.
My mom showed her real estate back in like the 80s, you know what I mean? So, but when I got diagnosed with like the ovarian cysts and endometriosis and fibroids, I had a consultation with her, and she is known to say like 7 orgasms a week, whether you feel like it or not. And it's like, but it's whether it's that or something else. You know, I started working out really consistently about a year ago. Do not let yourself get out of shape in your 40s. I'm now saying this to everyone, because getting it back at the end is really harder. I'm not bouncing back the way that I used to. But I'd never really, I was a dancer. I was into yoga. I was a runner, you know, all of those, but I was never like working out. And as I started this program, like online classes, listening to these instructors talk about like, just meet yourself where you are. Like you don't get like the workout doesn't get easier, you get stronger, or all. I'm like, I was actually just thinking about it today. Like, I think I need to create something where every day we scream, we make art, like, because we need to treat it like the workout or my meditation practice. I do it every day. I have terrible, like today I was like, that was a non-meditation, but I sat there for 20 minutes. With my eyes closed,
right,
concentrating and occasionally regulating and saying my mantra. And that matters, that like consistency of checking in with yourself. Again, it accrues, it accumulates in a positive way. And we need to treat it that way, like you're saying, not just waiting for the big bad moment, which is also another great opportunity, but just with some practice, creating a practice around it, these practices. Yeah, I love that.
Exactly. I think that's my next lesson, is that I don't need to wait until, you know, the emotion arises in the moment, because clearly for me, this was building. Whatever was going on for me was much deeper than, you know, the death of this animal. And so, yeah, so that was an opportunity for me to see the power of getting in touch with your feelings, releasing them from your body and being like, hey, I can do this every day, perhaps. And amazing, like maybe I'm just thinking now how that might actually help me in my creative processes as well, right? Because there's so much of my time right now post-doctorate, where I just feel kind of like in this kind of mush, this, like my energy is just kind of going like this, and it feels, I don't know, like I just am wasting my time being like, okay, what do I do now? Like, because I have all of this built up, first of all, structure, this container now that
It
I
was
don't,
external for a long time too.
Right. So I have this container now that's not transferred onto something else, or not reformed. And a lot of this creative energy, this creative flow that's still there, but doesn't quite know what direction to flow. So yeah, I could see how this practice would actually help me kind of ground and center and find the path forward.
You know what? I'm going to say two things to you. I will send you my first chakra grounding meditation. It's like 1 minute. Why don't I share it with everybody right now, actually?
Yeah.
Basically, you just bend over, bend your knees as much as you have to place your palms flat on the floor. So it's not about stretching your hamstrings. It's about getting your palms and your feet flat on the floor. So you're bent over. You can, whatever. Sometimes you can just get yourself comfortable and you hold it for 1 minute. That's it. Palms on the floor, breathing. You can say things like, I have the right to be here. I'm here. I'm real. I belong here. I'm safe here. Like all of these first chakra and embodiment, like I'm allowed to be here. I'm somebody, right? I belong, those kinds of things. 1 minute, and just breathe and keep your palms on the floor, and then slowly roll up. You might get a little dizzy. You might have to, again, build up to the full minute. I think people have had such success with feeling completely grounded and embodied so that's something that isn't really, you don't have to be screaming to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking for you, that's one. And then I think for you, we know this dance.
I know. I signed up for this online flamenco school, and I actually kind of went in and just started taking the modules yesterday. So it's true. It's like the dance is actually what enlivens and kind of helps, because it's the perfect balance between structure and flow. Dance is, right?
Yeah. And expression, it's all of that. It's containment, because also the way you can dance, there can be crying, there can be rolling around on the floor or the bed, right? It doesn't have to just be. And I also want to say that when you were talking about like structure, I'm like, well, but that's like the unintegrated masculine structure is that rigid rule. Like there's a right way to do things, right? And then that unintegrated like feminine where you're just like, blah, you know what I mean? Like there's no containment. So I think sometimes inside ourselves, we're like the unintegrated version of all of that. And it is messy. Yeah.
Exactly. Let me just look at our time here.
No, and also my computer is down to 13%. So
13%. Yeah, we talked for 45 minutes, so that's pretty good. We did a good job. Let me just check the feed here. I also want to let everybody know that I'm going to Maia, I'm going to put links to your work and your
awesome.
Your channel. Okay,
can I say a couple of things out loud about that if people are just like ready now? I have a podcast, Dirt Road Less Traveled. You can find it everywhere. I have some great guests there. And I also have, it's almost like that. It's like that Dharma talk style. Sometimes I'll go back and I used to have a live radio show and I would edit them for the podcast. I'm like, oh, I really needed to hear that, because I think there's a certain amount of channeling, like, I need to hear what I preach too. But I think if you want to start to switch out the voice in your head and stay in this conversation, Dirt Road Less Traveled could be a great way to do that. I had one of the highest compliments I ever got on the podcast is someone said that she felt like listening opened up a part of her brain she didn't know she had.
Oh my God.
That was really cool to hear, because I'm like, I feel called to just talk and say these things, and I'm obsessed, but oh God, I'm putting it out there. but I'm like, okay, I've gotten enough feedback at this point, and I really trust, again, with expression, that we have to, once we get connected, you have to just kind of follow through on it. So I want to recommend that to people as a place to keep this conversation going with themselves.
Yes, exactly. And I'll leave a link to that too, as soon as soon as we finish up here. So great. Those are your last words, or did you have anything else you want to mention?
That I want to say this to everyone, you're all right. You just have to dig yourself out, like that wild, free, true, authentic, whole feeling, connected part of yourself. Just keep going. I'm actually getting a little emotional. I was a mess for a long time, and I just felt like I was clawing my way out of something, but I didn't even know it was possible to be on the other side. And it is. There's nothing really wrong with you. There's not. And the news, because we all feel like there's going to be bad news if we sit quietly with ourselves. No, that's just some of the personality stuff and some of the life ego stuff that's happened to us, the stories we've created. Who you are underneath that is like a pure, beautiful being with a great personality who can handle anything.
Thank you, Maia.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you for having me. This was amazing.
I know we've been talking about recording our conversations for over a decade.
I know, it's like for years.
I know, but I think now we're both finally at the place where it's the right time.
Yeah,
It's the right time. Yeah. So thank you, Maia. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And we will, of course, like I said, I'll leave all the links to Maia's work in the YouTube text box. Please like, please share, please comment. And I also want to thank everybody who's a Patreon member. And if you're not a Patreon member, I encourage you to go to my Patreon page and find out all about membership benefits and cool things you get, like access to behind the scenes footage. And or you can make a one-time donation, and I'll have a link to that in my text box as well, because I'm here because of you guys, or I'm able to create more and more content because of you guys.
So, as you said that, Annalisa, I forgot, if there's something that I can offer, we can talk about that later. I'd love to give something to your Patreon members.
Oh, awesome. Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, we'll talk. Okay, great.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Ciao.
Ciao.
Okay. And Maia, you don't go anywhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Oops.